Hey there everybody, Powder here, and welcome back. Today, I want to give some impressions on Battlefield Hardline. Gonna just call this a Let's Look At, or go in the Let's Look At area, but it's gonna be less of a overview of everything in the game, and more just an impressions on it, and thoughts going forward for Hardline. There's not a whole heck of a lot to be said here, but there is an interesting topic to be covered because of EA and how Battlefield 4 came out, and the quality of the Battlefield 4 product, the issues it had and everything, and then less than a year later we are getting Hardline, and to be realistic, we're probably going to be seeing Hardline before everyone has access to the Battlefield 4, or all the Battlefield 4 DLC. The final DLC content for Battlefield 4 should be coming out for premium members somewhere in the mid-fall, and we're going to be seeing Hardline in October, November-ish. So it's pretty possible there'll still be, the non-premium members won't be able to access the Last Stand DLC for Battlefield 4 when Hardline is available. So there's been some pretty big outrage about, well, it's been kind of twofold from what I can tell. The first is they don't want an annual Battlefield, and with this I kind of agree. I don't want an annual Battlefield. But we already knew, but EA wants an annual first-person shooter that they can put out there to compete against Call of Duty. Is it going to be Call of Duty? Probably not, but they want something they can put out in order to at least rake in some income. Even if it's a substandard product, they're going to still sell 1.5 to 2.5 million copies of it, and that'll make them money, and that's what they're looking to do. We'll come back to that in a little bit. The other big complaint is tied in with the quality of Battlefield 4, and then the fact that when you actually sit down and play Battlefield Hardline, it plays a lot like a Battlefield game. I mean, it plays exactly like a Battlefield game with slightly different game modes. The combat is the same. Your strategy, for the most part, is the same. Your tactics as you move through the level and all that is pretty much the same. So there's this real idea that the Hardline should not be a standalone game. It should be DLC, maybe like similar to the Vietnam DLC was for Battlefield Bad Company 2. So let's start with that. I think part of what we are seeing here is, as I said before, EA wants a yearly first-person shooter. They want to set up their own rotation like Activision has going with Call of Duty, where they're going to have 2 or 3, hopefully 3 studios putting out a shooter each year. So they'll have one, then 3-year cycle in order to launch another one and everything. And they were originally setting this up with Medal of Honor. However, Medal of Honor, what was it, Warfighter? Advanced Warfighter? I forget what it's called. Medal of Honor Warfighter flopped big time. It got destroyed, and they've had to rethink it. And they went ahead, and it seems like they've probably, at least for the time being, killed off Medal of Honor. This is not the first time. They killed Medal of Honor off after, I think, Airborne, way back 8 years ago or so. So Medal of Honor Airborne came out. I don't think we had another one after that for quite a while. So this isn't the first time that's happened, but they tried this with that, and I think Hardline is the next extension of that. Now, what they have done, in my opinion, trying to look between the lines here, is they wanted to create a spin-off franchise, but they wanted to give it the name recognition of the Battlefield franchise in order to, attaching Battlefield to Hardline pretty much instantly guarantees 1 to 2 million sales. It definitely does. And that doesn't mean it's going to be good, but they could release any old crap with the Battlefield name on it for right now, and it would sell 1 million copies. They're at risk of ruining that name, but it would happen. So I think what they've done is they wanted, Visceral came to them, or I guess Visceral didn't come to them, they own Visceral. They were working with Visceral to set up a new game. And Visceral started creating this cops and robbers first-person shooter. If you don't know, Visceral Studios are the ones doing the primary work on Hardline. They are the ones behind the campaign, behind the theme, and all of that. And what EA did with this first-person shooter is they went ahead and said, let's put it in the Battlefield, under the Battlefield tag, in order to give it some name recognition. And from a sales point of view, this makes sense. However, from a game theme, in my opinion, it does not. Now, I can look at Call of Duty, and you can look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare, then you can look at Call of Duty Black Ops. And these two games are, in theme, slightly different, but one clearly draws from the other. When I look at Battlefield and then Battlefield Hardline, I don't see how Battlefield brings much other than a graphics engine, other than some basic weapons, to a cops and robbers game. And this is where my disconnect with Hardline first comes in. To me, for a cops and robbers game to work correctly, and probably the reason we've not had a competitive cops and robbers game that I can think of ever. We've had plenty of cop games, we've also had a handful of robber games, but we've not had many, or any that I can think of cops versus robbers. And the reason for this is, for a robber game to occur or happen correctly, the robbers have got to have the chance to win without ever firing a shot, without ever alerting the cops. That is part of the stigma of being the robber. Stigma is the wrong term there. Part of the excitement. It's this, knowing you're breaking the law, you're at a risk. Are you going to be able to pull this off flawlessly without setting off cameras, without alerting guards, without having somebody trip a silent alarm? That is what makes a good robber game. That is what Payday and Payday 2 learned. That is what they figured out. The problem is, if you put a game like that together, what do you have the cops doing, or how do you keep the cops busy while the robbers have to have their chance in order to do this heist without being caught? I wish I knew of a good answer. I don't. But what we have here in the Hardline beta is not a cops and robbers game. It is just a Battlefield game with some slightly modified character models and 2 new game modes, which are actually pretty good and fairly unique. Now, it's not all bad news. There's actually some good news about Hardline. Hardline brings, in my opinion, 3 great things together, and one other one that could be converted. And that last one that could be converted was what I just talked about at the end there, the game mode. Heists and blood money could be turned into some pretty interesting game modes. They need to be fleshed out a little bit. The themes behind them could work in pretty much any Battlefield game by turning the money into an intelligence thing, you know, some type of computer where you have to get there and steal files or something from this computer, and then you could have both armies fight all over that, and it could work fairly well for a small scale design game style. They need to be fleshed out, but the beginning is there for 2 very interesting game modes. The other 3 things that I really like about it that it's brought together, none of them are crazy innovative, but they do add a nice little touch that I think could be brought around and should be kept for Hardline, plus any future Battlefields. I would actually like to see them retroactively implemented back into Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. So first is the new weapon unlock system. If we come in here and we take a look at the loadout, the unlock system is now done via cash. So if you view my character profile up here, I have $58,000 and some change. And basically, as you play through the game, you're going to accrue cash instead of XP. And then, with that cash, you can unlock any weapon that you want for any class. When we come in here, so say we're under the mechanic here, you can see I already have the Uzi and the UMP unlocked. I can just buy the P90 and have it unlocked and ready to go. We could then come down here to the professional, which is the sniper. We can come in here and let's go ahead and let's unlock, let's see here, this is the higher damage one. Let's go ahead and unlock this PTR-91. There we go, we got another weapon, and so forth. The reason this is good is if you go back and you play Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, even back to the Bad Company games, In order to unlock all the different weapons, you have to play and use weapons that you probably don't want to. For example, I am currently in the process of unlocking the sniper rifles in Battlefield 4. I'm terrible with the sniper class. I don't like it, I don't enjoy it, but if I want to unlock these weapons, I have to go ahead and I have to spend time just dealing with the low-end entry weapons of that class, and then I'll slowly work up and I'll unlock them as I go through. This system right here would allow Battlefield to open up, and I don't think this is original by them. I believe at least one of the Call of Duties has tried to do this also. But it would allow me to go ahead and I could play as the assault, I could play as the medic, and I could play in a way that I enjoy the game, and then I can turn around and spend my cash to unlock weapons for the other classes. Now, it would need to be converted over for like Battlefield. They'd have to change this to XP or maybe service stars or something, but they could unlock things that way. I hope every Battlefield game picks this up. It would make the weapon unlocking less of a chore and more of a, well, I've learned so much, what do I want to play with next? Rather than being forced to use weapons you don't like. And I think this should be expanded to all accessories and all of that stuff. It's a very good system, and I hope they use it a bit more. The other two things that I really like that I hope they bring around is the new way that you can collect health and ammo from either the operator or the enforcer, or the assault or medic, depending on which Battlefield you're playing. Obviously, it's only on the operator or the enforcer. Currently, basically, you have to run around and you have to just yell at a guy, hoping that they're going to throw down med packs or ammo. And a lot of times, the people that you're chasing, they have no idea what they're doing, and you'll end up following a guy around half dead, a medic around, who just won't turn around and throw down a med kit. They've modified it now where if somebody they're playing operator and they have a first aid pack equipped, you can just walk up to them and click E to access them, and you'll go ahead and you'll take a med pack right off of them. The same thing for the enforcer and the ammo. This is pure genius. Should today be retroactively implemented back over every Battlefield game ever made. So you don't have to chase these people around anymore. You can just go up to them, click them, get your ammo, get your health, and continue on about your way. It's just pure genius. Should have been done. The other one is kind of minor, but for the smaller game modes that are a little more competitive, your capture the flags, to some extent your rushes, to a little extent the conquest. What they have done in Hardline is before the match starts, once people start loading in, there is either a 30-second countdown or there's a ready up window, where you have to have 6 people on each team confirm they are ready before the game mode is going to start. For a highly competitive game mode, that is very important. And it's just a simple thing, but it actually makes the beginning of a level a little more exciting. Rather than it just be whoever has the fastest internet connection to connect in, or whoever has the game running on an SSD and it loads the fastest, rather than them getting the head start, at least 6 people on each team are going to start up at the same time. It's a small thing, but it's a nice little change that should be implemented into all Battlefield games. So, that's the good stuff. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot else to say about Hardline. It's fun. It is fun, but it's not a cops and robbers game. And I think that's going to be where the biggest disconnect comes from. Now, some of this, I'll admit, I am interested to see what Hardline, or what Visceral can do with a single-player story in a first-person game based around cops and robbers. I am admittedly somewhat of a fan of Visceral. They did the Dead Space games, if you didn't know. And I believe Dead Space 1, while it's not an amazing story, what it did amazingly well as a horror game was they hit the pacing of a story nearly perfectly, in my opinion, at least a horror story. They did a very good job of keeping you moving along. They knew, okay, we have to have a high point and a low point. You got to give people a chance to feel safe again, but you can't just overwhelm them. A lot of horror games screw up, and they constantly overwhelm you, and eventually you get to the point where you've just been there, done that so much. In order to prevent that, you have to have these down moments. And a lot of games don't understand that. Visceral understood this, and I'm interested to see what they can do with a Battlefield, well, with a first-person story type shooter. And here's hoping it comes out good. My concerns, beyond the fact of this, is what's going to happen with the multiplayer. Since this game is being called Battlefield Hardline and not SWAT Hardline, or just Hardline, or NYPD Hardline, but since it's Battlefield Hardline, many people are going to buy the game under that Battlefield tag, and they're going to expect 64-player maps, they're going to expect tanks, they're going to expect jets, they're going to expect helicopters, rocket launchers, all this stuff going in. And we may actually get all of that in there. But is anything that I just described there sound like a cops versus robbers game? Because it doesn't to me. And that's where the biggest disconnect of Hardline and Battlefield comes from. In order to use the Battlefield name, they need these elements. But once they have those elements don't add to a cops and robbers game. A cops and robbers game needs to be like 5-on-5, maybe 8-on-8. It needs to be in a open city that is populated with NPCs, with multiple objectives that the robbers can attack at different times in order to get the cops chasing them around and try and steal things without being caught. It's not just, okay, there's 16 people on this end of the map, 16 people on that end of the map, there's the loot in the middle, go fight over it. That's not a cops versus robbers game. So we're probably, what I see happening is we're going to get a mediocre Battlefield game that is not a good cops and robbers game. We may get a decent cops and robbers story in the campaign, but who buys a Battlefield game for the campaign? I'm sure there's a few people out there, but they're by far not the normals. The vast majority of people that buy a Battlefield game buy it for the multiplayer. The campaign's a nice little distraction, and maybe with Visceral at the helm, the campaign might be pretty good. But the campaign isn't going to keep you playing Battlefield Hardline for 50 hours, 100 hours. No, it's going to be the multiplayer. The other big concern about the multiplayer is the same thing that I think what's going to happen is the same thing that happened to Medal of Honor Warfighter. So Medal of Honor Warfighter, I apologize, I don't remember the studio that did it, but it wasn't DICE that did the primary campaign. It was very similar to this, where there was another company that did the primary campaign, they did the theme, but they had DICE do the multiplayer, or oversee the multiplayer. And when you actually played the multiplayer of Medal of Honor, it wasn't terrible, but it felt very uninspired and lackluster. And in my opinion, what was going on there was, at that time, DICE was doing DLC for Battlefield 3. They were also in the process of programming Battlefield 4. They were updating the Frostbite engine, all this stuff for Battlefield 4. And they basically just sent their B team over to work on Medal of Honor and do enough to keep EA happy, but there was no focus. That was not what DICE was putting their focus into. It was a side project that they just did enough in order to accomplish it and get whatever money they were supposed to get for it. Well, we probably have the exact same thing happening here. We already know DICE is doing the multiplayer for Hardline, okay? Now let's look at what we got going on. Battlefield 4 launched with all kinds of issues. They've mostly gotten those fixed. You know, they took them 3 months to get the server issues all worked out, but that's all worked out. The netcode, while not terrific, has been pretty well upgraded. It's functioning now. It's acceptable now. We have 2 DLCs still being processed, or still being put together by DICE. One of them should be about done, but the other one's still in the works. We have updates still rolling out for Battlefield 4. There's currently actually some pretty big updates rolling out on the CTE, which is their version of a PTR. But there's big updates to Rush game mode. They're changing the Commander mode around and some stuff. There's some pretty big updates there. But we also know Battlefront is in the works. And I don't see that there's any way that not every ounce of talent that they have is working on Battlefront. If you're one of the good guys, good people at the company, good programmers, artists, whatever, you're not working on Hardline, you're working on Battlefront, what is going to be EA's massive shooter, likely next holiday, likely holiday 2015. We're going to be seeing Battlefront. It's going to come out alongside the new movie. It's going to have every ounce of manpower they can put behind it on that. So, between Battlefront, Battlefield 4, and Hardline, how much work do we think, or how much talent is going to be going to the Hardline multiplayer? I just don't see it. And it's going to be the exact same results as Medal of Honor. Acceptable multiplayer? Sure. Is it going to be complete garbage? No. But is it going to be fun? No. Is it going to outshine Battlefield 4? No. It's just going to be average. And the real shame here, well, not the real shame, somewhat of a shame, is, as I said before, I'm already kind of a fan of Visceral Studios. I love them for Dead Space and everything. I kind of predict Hardline's going to crash. It's going to crash and burn hard. And Visceral Studios is going to get folded under because, for some reason, EA is going to think Visceral Studios can't make a good game, even though they put them into a no-win situation with this type of deal, and there's nothing they can do. Now, all that said, I'm going to keep my eyes open. There are a few signs of some decent things going on here. One, we have a beta when the beta can actually help. With the Battlefield 4 beta, the Battlefield 3 beta, all that stuff, by the time the beta rolled out, the games had already been shipped and printed on the discs. About the only thing they could do was hope for a day one patch. The beta was nothing more than a glorified network test. That's fine. We now have a true beta, so there is time for this game to still be updated and sorted out and fixed. But everything we see here, at least for the multiplayer side, there's not so much fixing what they currently have. They have to either tear it down and recreate it as a true Battlefield game, or recreate it as a true Cops and Robbers game. Where it is currently in the middle, I don't see any salvaging it. You got to go completely one way or the other. But that's good. There is a new president over at EA, and he's saying the correct things. Now, the question's going to be, do his actions live up to that? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. But he's at least saying the right things, and they seem to be trying to do the right thing. But for now, I'm going to say everyone should stay pretty far away from this. Play the Battlefield Hardline beta for free. Let's hope for another beta closer to launch, and maybe we'll get a better idea of the game. But after looking at the Battlefield 4 launch issues, looking at the beta, how uninspired it is, I would not consider pre-ordering this game, even if you could pre-order it for half price. I would completely wait. Yep. So there we have it. That are my thoughts on Battlefield 4 Hardline. Now, I'm going to actually go back and play some more Battlefield 4. I've been enjoying the crap out of it now that it's been pretty much updated. Till then, though, this has been Powder. Thanks for watching.